Due to an unforeseen incident, the National Assembly building suddenly exploded, killing all the state leaders. Miraculously, amidst the catastrophe, one minister survived. Out of necessity, and to maintain the functioning of the government, this minister was forced to become the acting president. Everything happened so fast he barely had time to react. Just a few days prior, Park Moo-jin was the youngest Minister of Environment. At only 45, he was already an environmental science professor. Recognizing his talent, President Yang of South Korea appointed him directly to the cabinet, even gifting him an expensive pair of shoes on his inauguration day. Unaccustomed to such extravagance, Moo-jin tossed the shoes aside when he got home. His secretary, Sin Young, came to congratulate him. Recalling the arduous research of his past, he still seemed uncomfortable with the idea of leadership. Meanwhile, Madam Yoon, the head of the Republican Party, was relentlessly pressuring President Young through the media, causing his approval ratings to plummet. The reason? President Young was pursuing a peace treaty with the perceived enemy, North Korea, despite fierce opposition. He was determined to hold a National Assembly meeting to discuss the peace talks. His advisors tried to dissuade him but were politely dismissed. Along with his chief secretary, President Yang was determined to achieve a handshake with North Korea, ending the long-standing Cold War between the two nations. However, there was a prior issue to resolve: negotiating with the United States to lower environmental standards, allowing for better export of American cars. Moo-jin refused. His superiors threatened to fire him. Undeterred, he confidently attended the negotiations. At the meeting, the American representatives were adamant. They argued that their diesel cars ran without issue in other countries, so why were they considered polluting in South Korea? Moo-jin's team vehemently disagreed. The Americans became angry and demanded an end to the negotiations. Suddenly, Moo-jin called them back and, feigning an accident, sprayed exhaust fumes in their faces, not once, but twice. The media erupted. Moo-jin confidently asserted that the fumes from American diesel cars were undoubtedly more polluting than claimed. President Yang, upon hearing the news, summoned Moo-jin. He praised him for doing a good job, explaining that South Korea had long been pressured by the US, and this was their chance to push back. The public rejoiced. Despite this, in the following negotiation, Moo-jin was pressured to accept the import of American diesel cars or face dismissal. Frustrated, he vehemently opposed the president's demand, unwilling to let his children breathe polluted air. He declared that if they wanted the negotiations to succeed, they should fire him. President Yang, without hesitation, instructed Chief Secretary Han to convene a cabinet meeting with the agenda of dismissing the Minister of Environment. The following day, the president held the National Assembly meeting regarding the peace policy with North Korea, postponing Moo-jin's dismissal. Moo-jin didn't bother going to work. His daughter was participating in a reality show, so he and his wife drove to pick her up. Suddenly, the National Assembly building exploded. Traffic came to a standstill. Worried about his daughter, Moo-jin abandoned his car and ran to the scene. Chaos reigned. He spotted his daughter being loaded into an ambulance. Only one family member was allowed in the ambulance, so his wife accompanied their daughter. Before either father or daughter could fully process the situation, the presidential security team frantically arrived to escort Moo-jin away. Meanwhile, Agent Na was trying on her wedding dress. Upon hearing that Agent Oh had also gone missing in the explosion, she rushed to the scene. There, Agent Han rebuked her. "While they're busy dealing with international criminals, your team can't even handle domestic ones." Agent Na, speechless, quietly stepped outside to call her fiancé, but there was no answer. At the same time, Moo-jin arrived at the Blue House. Taking in the scene, he realized that all the state leaders had perished in the explosion. He was now, by constitutional law, the acting president, being the only surviving minister. He also became the commander-in-chief of the military, signing off on the implementation of martial law. Events unfolded rapidly, leaving him little time to adjust. That night, search teams discovered an undetonated bomb. Its potential for destruction was immense, prompting a full evacuation. All hopes rested on a single soldier tasked with disarming it. He didn't disappoint, successfully neutralizing the threat. However, his superiors seemed less concerned with the soldier's life and more with whether North Korea was responsible. Coincidentally, the bomb was indeed of North Korean origin. However, North Korean media immediately denied any involvement in the attack. A heated debate erupted between national intelligence and the military. Intelligence argued that there was no definitive proof, while the military advocated for a preemptive strike against North Korea. Overwhelmed by the pressure, Moo Jin retreated to the bathroom, violently ill. Inside, a young man harshly criticized him. Emerging, Moo Jin realized the critic was none other than Chief Secretary Han. Fearing for his job, Han immediately groveled in apology. Surprisingly, Moo Jin wasn't angry. Instead, he resolutely declared his intention to resign. Chief Secretary Han insisted it was impossible. If enemy nations perceived South Korea as leaderless, they would attack. As if on cue, Japan dispatched a warship into South Korean waters. The Japanese defense minister and the US military commander arrived to explain the situation. Meanwhile, editor Nam Wook, reviewing old videos, reminisced about his positive experiences with President Young, tears welling in his eyes. Moo Jin witnessed this, the sadness palpable in the faces around him. Later that night, Moo Jin found a private corner to call his wife and inquire about their daughter. She informed him that their daughter had just undergone surgery and needed to be monitored for a few days. Meanwhile, the leaders strategized. The US revealed that North Korea had sent a submarine a few days prior, which had yet to return. They suspected North Korea was plotting war. Commander Lee concurred, believing North Korea intended to invade. He urged Moo Jin to authorize a preemptive strike. Later, alone with his thoughts, Moo Jin pondered, is it possible that the North Korean submarine encountered trouble and is drifting towards us? At the same time, Madam Yoon of the Republican Party was providing aid to the victims of the explosion. This act, naturally, was captured by the media, boosting her presidential approval ratings. Having achieved her goal, she went to the Blue House to persuade Chief Secretary Han to form an alliance with the Republican Party to run the country. He firmly refused. Just then, Secretary Si-young brought in a map. Looking at it, Moo Jin noticed something unusual. Fish were dying in a straight line, matching the path of the North Korean submarine. This indicated a fuel leak and that the submarine was drifting towards South Korea, not invading. However, Chief Secretary Han dismissed the idea, arguing that politics wasn't a game and the country couldn't be led based on unconfirmed information. Han's sharp words intensified the pressure on Moo Jin. He attended the top-secret meeting regarding the preemptive strike against North Korea. The US offered support. When Moo Jin disagreed, the American representatives angrily prepared to leave. Chief Secretary Han stopped them, declaring that if they walked out, the US-South Korea alliance would be over. The Americans granted Moo Jin 10 minutes. If North Korea didn't respond, he would have to declare war. Meanwhile, Han received intelligence that North Korea was requesting a maritime rescue team to salvage their submarine. As he was about to share this information, he suffered a heart attack. The 10 minutes elapsed, and Moo Jin was obligated to fulfill his promise to the US. Just in time, North Korea called, confirming their submarine had sunk, precisely as Moo Jin had deduced. However, due to the military's eagerness for war, they had also deployed aircraft in response. Recognizing the imminent danger, Moo Jin persuaded North Korea that a nation's duty was to protect its people. North Korea agreed to withdraw its forces on the condition that South Korea salvage the submarine. War was averted. The next morning, Agent Na continued her investigation. She discovered her fiancé's phone in the rubble. Upon turning it on, she found a video simulating an attack on the National Assembly building. As she was about to report this, a soldier urged her to switch phones. Realizing he was a terrorist in disguise, she gave chase, but he escaped. Chief Secretary Han returned from the hospital. He commended Moo Jin's hypothesis but warned that luck rarely lasts. He advised Moo Jin to remain passive while he managed the government. North Korea sent a letter thanking Moo Jin for ensuring the survival of their submariners. Moo Jin's wife informed him that their daughter's surgery was successful. Hearing his daughter's voice, he burst into tears. The following day, Moo Jin made his first public appearance, introducing his 60-day term. The government relocated Moo Jin and his family to the Blue House, where their every move was monitored. His wife revealed that their son had been in a fight at school because of derogatory remarks about his father. On his first day in office, the existing staff greeted him politely. A press conference was held. Reporters bombarded him with difficult questions, challenging the spokesperson. When news broke of the North Korean submarine leak, The spokesperson feigned illness and excused himself. Nam Wook stepped in and performed brilliantly, expertly fielding every question. Meanwhile, Mu Jin struggled with the overwhelming aftermath of the bombing, feeling suffocated by the pressure. Chief Secretary Han, seeing his distress, abruptly cleared the room, dismissing everyone. At the National Assembly site, Agent Na discovered the bomb detonator hidden inside a Wi-Fi cable. She rushed to the internet provider to obtain the installation company's contact information, but the office was deserted. After a thorough search, she uncovered a suspicious clue and immediately ordered a police pursuit. Agent Na jumped from a building, determined to apprehend the suspect. However, he was skilled, easily countering her attack and escaping. He assaulted several officers during his flight. Agent Na intercepted him, landing several blows, but he again slipped away. Cornered, he climbed a power line and was electrocuted. A few days later, a mob vandalized the homes of North Korean immigrants. They incited violence, claiming their neighbors were sabotaging the country. Mayor Kang of Seowu formed an anti-riot squad, but it targeted the North Korean immigrants. All the immigrants were arrested. Seowu police, under Mayor Kang's command, continued to harass former citizens of the enemy nation. Legally, Mayor Kang hadn't broken any laws. Coincidentally, one of Mu Jin's wife's clients was among those arrested. She was terminally ill, but the police dismissed her condition as fake. Mu Jin's wife was furious, but her protests were futile. Mu Jin visited the National Assembly site to reassure the anxious public. Seeing their suffering, he removed his bulletproof vest in a gesture of solidarity. A mute young man approached. The security team, assuming he was a threat, rushed Mu Jin to safety and aggressively subdued the young man. He was unarmed, simply pleading for help for himself and other North Korean immigrants. He explained that they had renounced their North Korean citizenship for South Korean citizenship but faced discrimination. Moved, Mu Jin decided to issue an executive order, despite anticipating criticism. He spent the night poring over the Constitution, searching for legal grounds to justify an acting president issuing an executive order without violating national law. Chief Secretary Han objected, arguing it would incite riots. He told Mu Jin to dismiss himself if he insisted. The tension was palpable. Finally, Mu Jin dismissed Chief Secretary Han. Everyone was stunned. Han approached Mu Jin, stating this was how he chose to wield his power. He emphasized that everyone must be loyal to the president or face dismissal. The subsequent press conference regarding the executive order was fraught with pressure from reporters. The overwhelmed spokesperson left, and Nam Wook again stepped in. He skillfully managed the media. The detainees were released, but the terminally ill woman had died in custody. Mu Jin called her family to offer his condolences. Disguised as a civilian, he visited the memorial to mourn the victims alongside the public. Suddenly, rescue workers announced a survivor had been found in the rubble. Everyone rushed forward, hoping it was a loved one. The survivor was identified as Assemblyman Oh Young-seok. It was a miracle. On this side, Mrs. Yoon also started to make moves after hearing the news. Since the attack, some people have become presidents, some have been honored by the whole country. At the same time, the secretary wants Mu Jin to run for president, but he refuses and wants to return to school after 60 days of temporary leave. Suddenly, the Blue House loses power. This place is supposed to never be dark. That makes the security team panic, so they immediately take Mu Jin into hiding because there must be an attacker. The next morning, he is escorted to meet the military and intelligence. Here, they show the video that was sent to the Blue House last night while the system was hacked. This is an ultimatum threatening the security of South Korea. The person in the video is identified as Mo Kyung, the son of a high-ranking North Korean leader. However, the opposing country denies the video. Immediately, Mu Jin has the idea that there is a force that wants to cause war between the two countries because the video originated from Cambodia. So Nam Mai suggested that further investigation was needed. That idea was immediately opposed by Commander Lee. Everything was temporarily put on hold for the conference to organize the state funeral. The next day, everyone kept pressuring Representative Oh Young-seok, who had just experienced a near-death experience, to read the final eulogy. Mu Jin had no choice but to agree to this proposal. At the same time, Agent Na went to Representative Oh Young-seok, asking him about the tragic bombing at the National Assembly building and whether he knew what happened at that time. but he insisted that he didn't remember anything, but he seemed to be plotting something in his mind. After the meeting, Secretary Cha came to warn Mrs. Yoon that she knew the purpose of having Representative Oh Young-seok read the eulogy, taking advantage of this to pull him to the Republican Party, contributing to increasing her credibility in the presidential election. Seeing that the plan was exposed, she was no longer afraid. She immediately said that the Blue House was infiltrated last night and threatened to release this news to the public. The people learned that the government had kept silent about the information about the recent bombing, violating the people's right to know. From then on, she would profit and become the next president. Suddenly, Moo Jin appeared, saying that he would tell her the whole truth. Hearing that, Secretary Cha's face changed color, because if she revealed that confidential information, it would be like biting herself for the capitalists. Being honest is good, but she only receives praise, and she always suffers losses. However, Moo Jin had made up his mind, so he couldn't change anything. He immediately showed the threatening video from last night to Mrs. Yoon and hoped that she would keep this secret from the public. He would deal with it himself later. Hearing that, she agreed. On this side, Secretary Cha was so busy that she had to eat instant noodles day and night. Since Secretary General Han was dismissed, he had been responsible for everything. At the same time, the rescue team agreed to leave because the scene was too dangerous. There was still a possibility that there were bombs and the building's columns could collapse at any time. The detector also showed no signs of life. Knowing that his lover was still missing from the explosion, Agent Na angrily scolded, but it still didn't change anything. Remembering Representative Oh Young-seok's testimony, comparing it with the place where he was found, it was indeed quite far away. That meant he was lying. The team also realized that Oh Young-seok was likely involved in the bombing, so they started checking the camera again. Sure enough, there was a time cut. At this point, the intelligence agency had tracked down Mo Kyung's precise location, the person who sent the video threatening national security the previous day. However, the location was in a disputed border area between Cambodia and Vietnam, meaning that sending troops there could be interpreted as an act of war by the neighboring country. General Lee proposed sending a raiding party, but Moo Jin rejected the idea. Defying the order, General Lee left, secretly plotting to deploy troops anyway. Meanwhile, reporter Wu arrived at the Blue House, threatening to release the security threat video to the public unless she was granted an exclusive interview with Moo Jin. Faced with this ultimatum, they had no choice but to accept. Concurrently, Agent Na and her team discovered a gap in the security footage from the day of the explosion. Indeed, Representative Oh wasn't present at the time, raising the possibility that he was the bomber. Moo Jin decided to proceed with the interview. Everyone was worried about him. Prior to the interview, Secretary Cha warned Moo Jin against naively believing that honesty would be rewarded. It would only create weaknesses for his opponents to exploit. Initially, reporter Wu stuck to the pre-approved questions. Just when it seemed the ordeal would end smoothly, she threw a curveball. Was Moo Jin already dismissed before the explosion? If so, are you qualified to serve as acting president? As this was a live broadcast, the entire nation was watching. The secretaries were terrified and signaled him not to reveal the truth. This was a trap set by Madam Yoon to usurp the presidency. Representative Oh's expression shifted. General Lee ordered troops to Cambodia to commence the operation to capture Mo Kyung. Unexpectedly, after a moment of contemplation, Moo Jin admitted the truth: he had indeed been dismissed. The secretaries, realizing the damage was done, could only despair. The news spread like wildfire across all media outlets. The public demanded Moo Jin's removal. Approval ratings within the Blue House surged after the revelation. Secretary Cha lamented Moo Jin's decision not to deny the dismissal, but Moo Jin replied, "Should I lie to the people? My conscience wouldn't allow it." Inside the Blue House, a meeting was convened to determine who was behind this scheme. Suspicion immediately fell on Madam Yoon. Secretary Cha called her to question her about the interview, but she denied involvement and attempted to recruit him to her side. She claimed that Mayor Kang was responsible. Indeed, Mayor Kang was contacting reporter Wu, promising her the position of presidential secretary if the acting president was removed. Realizing she was merely a pawn, Wu angrily stormed off. At the same time, Agent Na arrived with information, requesting an investigation into Representative Oh. After examining 2 photographs, she realized she couldn't use unverified evidence to legally investigate a National Assembly member. Shortly thereafter, Secretary Cha arrived with a legal interpretation of Mu Jin's eligibility. Since the explosion occurred before the dismissal took effect, he was still the legitimate acting president. Everyone rejoiced, then prepared for the memorial service as planned. At the memorial service, Representative Oh was scheduled to deliver the eulogy. Agent Na vehemently opposed this. She angrily confronted him at his home, questioning his whereabouts during the explosion and why he lied about being in the assembly hall. He calmly replied that he genuinely didn't remember. At that moment, a group of people rushed in, berating her for daring to question their superior. It turned out that Representative Oh was a former Marine, his back still bearing scars. His subordinates vehemently defended him. This inadvertently revealed to Agent Na that, at the time of the explosion, Representative Oh was making a phone call to a former comrade. At the same time, Mu Jin and his wife arrived at the memorial, but as he offered flowers, memories of President Yang flooded his mind. Despite his previous lack of popularity, he had been a good man. A hush fell over the crowd after the flower-laying ceremony. Representative Oh Young-seok stood at the podium to deliver the eulogy. Instead of reading the prepared speech, he spoke from the heart, criticizing the leadership of South Korea and dramatically removing the medal awarded to him by the state. He declared that he would only wear it again with pride when South Korea became truly strong. Indeed, Representative Oh Young-seok had an alibi, as Agent Na's subordinates had discovered. He had truly been on the phone with a comrade at the time of the explosion. After the memorial, another crisis arose. The Cambodian government had issued an ultimatum forbidding South Korea from violating its territory. This was a direct consequence of General Lee's troop deployment. Upon hearing the news, Mu Jin confronted the general in the war room. Instead of showing remorse, General Lee criticized Mu Jin, questioning his qualifications to be president. Before that issue could be resolved, another problem surfaced. Someone within the Blue House had leaked the threatening video from Mu Rong, the suspected North Korean operative, to the media. Mu Jin immediately set out to discover the leak's source. Recalling that he had shown the video to Madame Yoon, he summoned her for questioning. She denied any involvement. Fortunately, the dismissal scandal had faded, replaced by public support for Mu Jin to capture the terrorist Mu Rong. Seemingly realizing something, Mu Jin went to see Secretary Cha. It turned out that Secretary Cha was the one who leaked the video, arguing it was necessary to restore Mu Jin's authority and prevent General Lee's reckless actions in Cambodia. Mu Jin returned to the war room and, seeing no other option, ordered General Lee's dismissal. Everyone in the room was stunned. After this incident, Mu Jin recognized Secretary Cha's crucial role in his recent successes and promoted him to Chief Secretary. Upon hearing the news, Secretary Su Dong congratulated him. Secretary Cha, seizing the opportunity, invited her for chicken and beer, but she politely declined. Back in his office, he laughed upon seeing his congratulatory gift, a giant box of ramen. That night, Mu Jin sought out Mr. Han, sharing his burdens. Mr. Han offered words of encouragement, urging him to make the most of his 60-day term. After Mu Jin left, Mr. Han reminisced about the late president, drinking alone. Meanwhile, Agent Na, having failed to investigate Representative Oh, offered her resignation despite her superior's objections. Upon returning home, she discovered a package containing her wedding photos. Flipping through the pictures, she wept for her deceased husband. Suddenly, her phone rang. An anonymous caller provided incriminating information about Representative Oh Young-seok, instructing her to investigate room 119. Simultaneously, Mu Jin received news that the Cambodian government was refusing all aid from South Korea and would not allow their troops to cross the border. Fearing war, the public began panic buying supplies, and the wealthy started fleeing the country. Mu Jin was left with only one last card to play. Meanwhile, Agent Na was still searching for the National Assembly's blueprints, but the engineer insisted no such room numbered 119 existed. It was likely in the original blueprints, held by Madame Yoon, who was currently attempting to recruit Representative Oh to the Republican Party. He steadfastly refused. Mu Jin made a final decision to offer Oh Young-seok the position of Prime Minister, believing his current popularity could help stabilize the nation. Despite Mu Jin's persistent persuasion, Oh Young-seok declined, recognizing the Blue House's intention to exploit him. Before leaving, he subtly suggested that if Mu Jin couldn't persuade Cambodia, he should negotiate with neighboring countries. Their consent would render Cambodia's objections irrelevant. At this point, Agent Na approached Madame Yoon. Madame Yoon provided the original blueprints in exchange for being the first to be informed of any new developments in the bombing investigation. Agent Na reluctantly agreed. The Cambodian and Vietnamese ambassadors arrived. Mu Jin proposed a deal. South Korea would release 2 Vietnamese agents in exchange for the release of a Cambodian agent. After careful consideration and persuasion from Mu Jin, both countries agreed and granted South Korea permission to send troops to apprehend the terrorist Mo Kyung. With this breakthrough, Mu Jin immediately began planning the military operation, personally meeting with the commander. Observing the soldiers diligently training for the mission, he instructed the captain to capture Mo Kyung alive if possible. However, he emphasized that if any soldier's life was threatened, they should prioritize their own safety and neutralize the enemy. Touched by the president's concern, the captain, though hesitant, promised to protect his team. That night, Mu Jin couldn't sleep, worried about the soldiers' safety. He knew they all had families waiting for them and didn't want any casualties. His wife comforted him, assuring him he had done everything he could. All that remained was to await news of the operation's success. The next morning, Madame Yoon summoned Secretary Cha to inquire about room 119, which Agent Na had mentioned. It was likely a bomb shelter. Mu Jin called Oh Young-seok, thanking him for his advice and inviting him to the Blue House that evening to observe the operation. That night, the weather turned foul. The soldiers encountered problems upon landing. A support team member was injured and unable to participate, but a replacement was available, so the mission continued. Oh Young-seok arrived at the Blue House. Mu Jin explained his contribution to the operation, justifying his presence. Minutes later, the soldiers approached the target building. After breaching the entrance with explosives, they stormed inside, neutralizing the hostiles one by one. Civilians were escorted to a safe area. The team pursued Mo Kyung, but he had apparently escaped. A cigarette on the table was still smoldering. Meanwhile, Agent Na obtained more concrete evidence to incriminate Representative Oh Young-seok. She discovered that besides the cable-detonated bomb, other fail-safes were in place, and room 119 was indeed a bomb shelter, coinciding with where Oh Young-seok was found. His survival was not a miracle, but a carefully orchestrated plan. At the same time, soldiers continued searching for the sniper outside, also reporting the enemy's position. Sure enough, the enemy emerged, holding a bomb and a hostage, threatening the troops not to make any sudden moves. With no other choice, the captain descended, bravely advancing to negotiate. The sniper outside was unsure whether to shoot, waiting for the captain to create an opportunity. Suddenly, all communication was cut off, followed by the explosion of a bomb. They received a report that Mo Kyung had been captured alive, the plan a success. However, the commander remained silent. It turned out the captain had sacrificed himself. He had embraced the bomb and jumped clear, protecting his team. Hearing this, Mu Jin fell into deep thought. Finally, the captain's remains were sent back to his hometown. Everyone mourned his heroic death. Indeed, the captain had fulfilled his orders to capture Mo Kyung alive and ensure the safety of his team. Mu Jin stood there sadly, as the other soldiers began to weep. Afterwards, he sought out Mr. Han, angrily confronting him, demanding to know why he had been put in such a position, forced to watch someone else die. Mr. Han retorted that it wasn't his fault, but the terrorists. His duty now was to find them, fulfilling the wishes of the people and honoring the fallen. Comforted, Mu Jin invited Mr. Han to return to the Blue House to help him with this difficult task. The capture of the terrorist who threatened national security was announced to the public. Everyone rejoiced at the news. Meanwhile, Agent Han interrogated Mo Kyung. When Mo Kyung refused to speak, Agent Han taunted him with past events. This tactic proved effective. In a fit of rage, Mo Kyung blurted out that someone else was behind it. But before he could reveal the name, he was poisoned. The audacity of the terrorists to act so brazenly within such a tense situation was shocking. Agent Na suspected the person who delivered the meal was the culprit. But by the time they gave chase, he had long since escaped. The Blue House received the news, and everyone panicked. It seemed someone else was masterminding this, possibly even more dangerous than North Korea. Reconstructing the crime, they were surprised to discover Mo Kyung had left a suicide note. It contained the single word, "Tien." This was likely the person who had killed him. At the same time, Mr. Han returned to the Blue House as a policy advisor. He immediately proposed forming a non-partisan government to demonstrate to the terrorists that the government was still functioning effectively, and to reassure the anxious public. When the order for formation was announced, administrative units across the country nominated their top candidates. Representative Oh Young-seok was appointed Minister of National Defense. Mu Jin worried that he wouldn't accept, but Secretary Cha countered that this was Oh Young-seok's forte. Having served with distinction in a previous war, he would surely accept. Hearing this, Mu Jin was reassured. Meanwhile, Agent Na, using camera footage, successfully sketched Tien, the suspected assassin of Mo Kyung. He then reported to his superiors that Mo Kyung's girlfriend also knew about the bombing, but someone within intelligence, a mole, had concealed this information. Now they couldn't trust anyone, not even the director. Coincidentally, the director summoned Agent Han, informing him that the president had called a meeting, suspecting Representative Oh Young-seok to be the culprit. Confident, Agent Han brought the information to Mu Jin. However, unexpectedly, just as he was about to reveal it, Representative Oh appeared. Agent Han quickly hid the documents and reported to Mu Jin that they were still actively investigating. This behavior inadvertently exposed Agent Han's actions, and he also discovered that Oh Young-seok had been appointed Minister of National Defense. Yoon, furious upon hearing this news, went to the Blue House and threatened Mu Jin against forming a new government. She threatened to rally the Republican Party, impeach him publicly, and undermine his credibility to seize power. Simultaneously, Mayor Kang joined forces with Yoon, holding a press conference to question the president's authority, arguing that as an acting president, Mu Jin had no right to alter the status quo. However, at the Blue House, Mu Jin declared he had only two choices: impeachment or a paralyzed government. He defied the opposition and formed the new government, despite the potential decline in his approval rating. That night, Mayor Kang met with a Blue House staff member to extract information about internal affairs. The following morning, Mu Jin's wife found evidence supporting his authority to form the new government. He intended to share this with his secretaries, but Secretary Cha invited him to a room containing a recording of Mayor Kang from the previous night. It turned out that Blue House staff member An was the one who leaked the news about Mu Jin's potential dismissal earlier. Instead of reprimanding him, Mu Jin called An in for a conversation. Afterward, Mu Jin publicly announced the formation of the new government. The two parties, fearing a decline in their approval ratings due to the public's support for Mu Jin's leadership, angrily called for an impeachment session that same day, aiming to rally all National Assembly representatives to their side. However, few attended the impeachment session. Instead, they gathered at the new National Assembly building. It turned out that Mu Jin had played the recording of An and Mayor Kang. He then cleverly brought An to his side by expressing his trust and not dismissing him. Consequently, An approached Mayor Kang, threatening him to stop the impeachment and bring his entire party over to the government formation session. Although furious, Mayor Kang was powerless, knowing that if the recording were released, his career would be ruined. Yoon, learning of Kang's betrayal, berated him, but he simply made a sarcastic remark and left, infuriating her. That night, reflecting on Mu Jin's kindness, remembering that he had even given him the original recording, which An could now delete without anyone knowing he was the source of the leak, and pledged his loyalty to Mu Jin. At that moment, Secretary Cha met with Mu Jin, suggesting he run for official president to avoid public suspicion. Simultaneously, reporters began questioning the whereabouts of Mo Kyung, whether he was alive or dead, citing a video showing his body being transferred to the forensic team. Nam Wook immediately countered, citing national security, and abruptly ended the press conference. Soo Young, upon hearing the news, reassured him that he had done the right thing, as revealing their every move to the public would also inform the terrorists. Later, a secret meeting took place. Yoon was exploiting the Blue House's concealment of Mo Kyung's death to discredit Mu Jin. Meanwhile, subordinates discovered footage clearly showing Oh Young-seok sneaking into the bomb shelter. The explosion at the National Assembly occurred at that exact moment, meaning he hadn't known about the bombing beforehand and could even be the perpetrator. Agent Han, deciding to take the fall, presented the evidence to Mu Jin, confessing to being the bomber. Both Mu Jin and his staff were stunned. They subsequently transferred Agent Han to a detention center for interrogation. Despite the possibility of imprisonment, he insisted on confessing. Agent Na, upon hearing the news, vehemently defended Agent Han, insisting he wasn't capable of such an act. At the same time, investigators arrived to take her away, suspecting her of complicity, fearing that if she were arrested, there would be no one left to expose Representative O. She fled. Fortunately, a subordinate had a car prepared, allowing her a narrow escape. En route, he gave her copies of the evidence. With this, Agent Na requested to proceed alone, instructing her subordinate, Ms. N, to return to avoid suspicion of being an accomplice. The investigation into Oh Young-seok's innocence neared its conclusion. Agent Na called Yoon, asking her to stall the session to allow her to deliver the evidence. Yoon didn't disappoint. However, on her way, Agent Na was hit by a truck. Police arrived at the scene, but one of them was T-in disguise. The recess ended, and Yoon could stall no longer. T-in, after pretending to rouse Agent Na, reached into her bag and took the evidence. She regained consciousness and fought back, but severely injured, she was no match for him. The investigation concluded, and Oh Young-seok officially became Minister of National Defense. Back home, Mu Jin voiced his doubts. His wife, a lawyer, astutely observed that Agent Han's hesitation before revealing the truth suggested someone suspicious was present. Recalling that only Oh Young-seok was there at the time, Mu Jin became suspicious. Preparations for the minister's inauguration ceremony were underway in the office. The next morning, Yoon visited Mu Jin, revealing that Agent Na had called the previous night, claiming to have evidence against Oh Young-seok, but then lost contact. Coincidentally, a car accident had occurred nearby. It was highly likely that Agent Na was the victim. Suspicion fell on Oh Young-seok. Despite being from the opposing party, Yoon, a patriot, couldn't allow a bomber to become a national leader. Mu Jin summoned the intelligence director, demanding to know Agent Na's whereabouts. The director admitted that she was suspected of being an accomplice and had escaped. At that moment, Agent Na awoke, finding herself alive and sheltered in her subordinate's home. She wondered who had brought her there, questioning whether her attacker had actually spared her. Based on the information he had, Mu Jin decided to postpone the inauguration ceremony. Nam Wook immediately objected, but Mu Jin skillfully handled the situation, instructing him to manage the media while he investigated Oh Young-seok. Despite widespread disagreement and distrust of Yoon, Mu Jin decided to take the gamble. Even Secretary Cha privately advised against it, warning of a drastic drop in his approval rating given Representative Oh's popularity. Unmoved, Mu Jin prioritized his ethics over public opinion. Secretary Cha then left. Angrily, Secretary Cha confided in Soo-young that he didn't want Mu Jin to be slandered. Meanwhile, a colleague showed Agent Na a picture of T-in, asking if he was the one who attacked her. Recalling the incident, she confirmed it was him. At that same moment, T-in appeared at a tailor shop frequented by Oh Young-seok. The intelligence director was also there. It turned out he was the mole within the agency, the most powerful figure in intelligence. The press conference at the Blue House began. Nam Wook's expression suddenly changed. Someone within the Blue House had leaked information about past ministers' illegal activities, such as embezzlement and corruption, aiming to dismantle the previous administration. Internal chaos erupted, as Mu Jin was also part of that administration, and they now targeted him, threatening to reveal his scandals to the public. Secretary Cha questioned Mu Jin, who was unaware of any past wrongdoing. Outside, Secretary Cha asked Soo-young if Mu Jin had ever done anything wrong. He pointed out that even the most upstanding leaders are scrutinized by the public. Soo-young immediately defended Mu Jin, arguing that as a teacher, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to commit such acts. Just then, reporter Wu arrived, presenting evidence of Mu Jin's wife's infidelity, accusing him of ruining another family. Alarmed, Secretary Cha rushed to the president's office, demanding to know the truth. Mu Jin, without hesitation, admitted it. Simultaneously, the intelligence director pressured Agent Han to confess that Agent Na was his accomplice. Panicked, Agent Han insisted he acted alone. Meanwhile, Agent Na was at a supermarket, seemingly following someone. Terrorists were also present. Frightened, a woman hid in the restroom and called someone, tearfully inquiring about her son's well-being. Before she could finish, Agent Na knocked on the door, identifying herself as an agent. The woman was Agent Han's wife. The terrorists were holding Agent Han's son hostage, using him as leverage to force Agent Han to become their pawn. Moments later, the terrorists spotted and pursued Agent Na. However, as a skilled agent, she easily overpowered them and made a dramatic escape. Everyone in the Blue House now knows about Mu Jin's situation. However, the First Lady sought out Secretary Cha and revealed the truth about their past. It turns out that Mu Jin had helped her successfully solve a difficult case years ago. Although they didn't get along very well, Mu Jin, driven by his inherent kindness, confessed his feelings for her. The First Lady, however, was already married with a son. Due to her husband's domestic violence, she had left him and was living separately with her son. She agreed to date Mu Jin, but without initiating divorce proceedings with her husband. Upon learning this, Secretary Cha joyfully approached Mu Jin, questioning why he had kept this a secret and assuring him that he had a way to help him escape the scandal. However, Mu Jin seemed reluctant, unwilling to drag his son into the political arena and subject him to public scrutiny. Resigned, Secretary Cha left, remarking that Mu Jin couldn't win the presidency because the position wasn't meant for good people. Mu Jin reminisced about the past. Though not his biological son, he had always cared deeply for the boy. Even a small scratch on his face would send him rushing to the hospital, anxiously waiting and foregoing sleep. When things had calmed down, he had presented the First Lady with a wedding ring, agreeing to be a father to her child and provide for her. They had promised each other that their son would never suffer again. This was the reason he didn't want his son to know he wasn't his biological father. Meanwhile, Mayor Kang, also preparing to run for president, tried to lure Secretary Cha to his side. However, Secretary Cha firmly refused, still holding on to his belief in Mu Jin. Simultaneously, Miss Yoon also announced her presidential candidacy. News reports praised Mu Jin for his tireless efforts in stabilizing the country after the bombing, suggesting he should now rest and return to academia. Seeing this, Secretary Cha angrily left. The next morning, during breakfast, the First Lady's son expressed his feelings, acknowledging Mu Jin as his true father, a role no one could replace. Mu Jin was overjoyed. Shortly after, Secretary Cha sought advice from Mr. Han. Mr. Han simply smiled and said that a good presidential secretary believes in good people, not just in winning. This sparked a realization in Secretary Cha. He recalled Mu Jin's consistent integrity throughout their time together. He then approached Mu Jin, pledging his full support in helping him become the next president. At the same time, Mizu uncovered footage of the earlier accident, revealing that someone else had rescued the agent. Captain Yang also led Mu Jin to a secret location. There, Agent Jun-Oh suddenly appeared. Agent Na, seeing her lover alive in the footage, was overcome with joy and tears. Jun-Oh's hidden motive was to uncover the true culprit behind the bombing, suspected to be an insider within the Blue House. It turned out that on the day of the bombing, he had frantically reported the threat to the Blue House, but was intercepted by thugs. This implied that the insider had ordered his men to detain him. By the time he reached the National Assembly building, it was too late. Knowing they would search for him, Jun-Oh had planted his belongings in the rubble, faking his death to secretly investigate the bombing. He presented a video simulation of how the bombing was carried out. To meet Mu Jin without suspicion, he had fabricated the scandal allegations. Now, with his mission accomplished, he cleared all the accusations. Jun-Oh urged Mu Jin to find the insider, not only within the Blue House but also within the intelligence and military communities. He revealed a crucial piece of information. One other survivor from the bombing remained General Lee. Back to the investigation of the murderer, the NIST director revealed Agent Na's motive. Driven by the grief of losing her lover in an accident, she and Agent Han had screamed Mo Dong's name together in prison. Remembering Jun-Oh's testimony that Oh Young-seok was connected to the mastermind, Mu Jin went against the majority and postponed the minister's appointment. Afterwards, Captain Sang escorted him to interrogate General Lee about the previous bombing. Everyone else who knew about the simulation was dead, leaving only the general. He immediately denied having access to the files, claiming that right after the incident, the Blue House notified him of his dismissal from the military. His authority was only restored later, so he couldn't be an accomplice. This left Mu Jin bewildered. He then placed the general under house arrest until his claims could be verified. To avoid suspicion about his secret investigation, Mu Jin confided only in Secretary Su Young, who had been by his side for the past 10 years. He asked her to investigate which Blue House employee had called to revoke General Lee's authority before the incident. That night, Jun-Oh called his colleagues to inquire about Agent Na's whereabouts. They discovered someone had recently replaced her gas canister. Finding this suspicious, he snuck out. On the way, he called to warn the two to leave the apartment immediately. Sure enough, the perpetrator detonated the gas. Fortunately, she had already escaped. Reunited, their loving gazes met, and they embraced, overcome with joy. Suddenly, someone shot at Agent Na. Jun-Oh jumped in front of her, taking the bullet. The wound was too deep, and he didn't survive. Watching her lover die, she wept inconsolably. Seeing the assassination fail, the shooter informed his organization. At that moment, someone named Kim within the organization revealed that their most powerful figure was VIP. Meanwhile, Secretary Su Young traced the call revoking General Lee's authority back to the presidential secretary's office. An expert also reported this to Mr. Han, whose expression changed drastically. Su Young no longer trusted Secretary Cha and made an excuse to cancel their date. Mu Jin received the news of Jun-Oh's death. Agent Na fell into a deep depression. Rereading messages from her lover and reminiscing about their early days in the service, a time that seemed so beautiful then, she sobbed in agony. Her subordinate, Min Su, seeing her state, didn't dare enter. At the same time, Mu Jin, remembering his promise to Jun-Oh, resolved to hunt down the killer. Minutes later, he met with Mr. Han and asked him what kind of country Korea was. Mr. Han responded, Mu Jin should be the one answering that question. The next morning, Mai-Du woke up to find Agent Na had been awake all night searching for clues about the killer. Indeed, she had found him. As she prepared to go out for revenge, Mai-Du stopped her, saying it was too dangerous to go alone. Now, she had a teammate. They should work together to catch the perpetrators. That way, her lover's death wouldn't be in vain. Suddenly, Agent Han's wife called, begging Agent Na to save her son, as they hadn't been able to contact him for 2 days. Through your recording, they pinpointed their location. At the same time, Su Young went to the tech room, requesting the retrieval of the recording that stripped General Lee of his authority. However, upon leaving, Secretary Cha was waiting, asking what she was doing secretly that she couldn't tell him. She remained silent, so he left, frustrated. Meanwhile, T ordered one of his men to buy ice cream for a child. Agent Na happened to witness this. A chase ensued. Naturally, with her agent skills, she quickly caught up to him. He was about to pull out a weapon, ready for a fight. However, during the struggle, the idiot accidentally shot himself. At that moment, Mu Jin became fully convinced that Oh Young-seok was involved in the case. He asked his subordinate to contact Agent Na quickly so his own actions wouldn't be suspected. Mu Jin still held the minister's appointment ceremony. However, following a lead from the villain's key, they found the apartment where the sniper was positioned. Even more alarming, it was the building directly opposite where the president was speaking. With a few deft moves, T easily snuck inside, retrieved the hidden sniper rifle, assembled it, and aimed it at Mu Jin. At the same time, Agent Na was rapidly approaching. Suddenly, a call came in. Su Young sent the recording of the call, stripping General Lee of his rank. Upon playing it, she was shocked to discover that the person on the call was none other than Secretary Cha. Simultaneously, Agent Na was discovered. Before being apprehended, she fired a shot aimed directly at Tien. However, it was too late. Mu Jin was shot. Chaos erupted. People scattered, running in all directions. Security personnel were deployed around the hospital, escorting the president in for treatment. Fortunately, the bullet didn't hit a vital organ, and he survived. Upon examination, shrapnel was lodged in Mu Jin's heart. He needed immediate surgery, or it would be life-threatening. The surgery would take about half a day. The most senior member of the current government would assume the role of acting president. That person was the Minister of Finance. However, his body was brought in shortly afterward. Everyone was horrified by the news. Then, the second most senior person, and the most popular with the public, was none other than Representative Oh Young-seok. At the same time, he also made a move against Mr. Kim. Why was the organization taking these actions without him knowing anything? In the interrogation room, Agent Han repeatedly questioned why Agent Na was at the scene. She also possessed the key to the sniper's room, but she invoked her right to remain silent, unable to trust anyone. The First Lady, upon learning of her husband's shooting, rushed to see him. Seeing the president in danger and unable to do anything, she could only weep. Thankfully, Mr. Han comforted her, offering some solace. Meanwhile, Mrs. Yoon went to see the main character. He desperately tried to convince her to stall Mr. presumably Oh Young-seok and wait for his return. Seeing his sincerity, she agreed to help this time. At this point, Oh Young-seok assumed the role of acting president, while Mu-jin was taken into surgery. Simultaneously, Captain Teeth went to the interrogation room, asking to speak with Agent Na, but his true intentions were something else entirely. A few minutes later, he signaled, indicating he was trustworthy. Shortly after taking office, Oh Young-seok demonstrated his leadership. He made decisive decisions, surprising everyone. A young person couldn't do that unless it was pre-planned. Then, Miss Yoon fulfilled her promise, going to distract Oh Young-seok. However, he was truly formidable, completely unmanipulated, powerless. She had to leave. At the same time, Agent Na also identified her ally, so the two pretended to fight. Amidst the chaos, they shared some secrets without arousing suspicion. Immediately after, Captain Yang sought out Mizu. Initially, he thought he was being captured by terrorists, so he ran away. But after a few introductions, he finally relaxed. In the car, the two discussed Tien. He was the president's assassin. At this time, Oh Young-seok also arrived at the military headquarters, ordering them to shoot the assassin. However, Soo-young objected, arguing that if it were Mu-jin, he would have ordered the assassin captured alive for interrogation to find the mastermind. But Oh Young-seok countered, saying, "Didn't we capture Mu-jin before, and we couldn't get anything out of him?" After that, he vehemently ordered the assassin to be shot, citing the safety of the soldiers. A few minutes later, the mission was successful. The sniper was dead. At the hospital, Mu-jin's surgery encountered difficulties. Suddenly, he suffered massive hemorrhaging. Everyone frantically tried to save him. Shortly after, the surgery ended. The doctor announced they had successfully saved him. However, due to excessive blood loss, he would be in a coma for a while. Upon hearing this shocking news, everyone felt anxious. Because with Oh Young-seok in power, it was highly likely the bombing incident would be buried. However, Secretary Cha's face remained indifferent. So Soo-young became angry, yelling at him for being heartless, only caring about approval ratings and not Mu-jin's health. Immediately after, the Blue House press conference took place. Reporters inquired about the sniper's whereabouts. As the spokesperson was about to answer, Oh Young-seok suddenly stepped forward, asking to answer the question on behalf of the Blue House. He explained, "To avoid further casualties, I ordered his elimination. At the same time, I declare war on terrorists." With these words, the easily swayed public naturally rallied behind him. This caused Oh Young-seok's approval ratings to skyrocket, making him the presidential candidate with the highest chance of winning. Meanwhile, Mu-jin also woke up. Editor Nam Wook immediately came to greet him. Oh Young-seok told him about this, advising him to lower his profile. At the same time, his wife continuously inquired, wanting Mu-jin to continue resting, not wanting him to return to the Blue House. After all, someone else had already replaced him. But she didn't understand how dangerous the situation was now. Soo-young also announced, "Oh Young-seok just ordered the sniper shot. It's likely a way to silence him, to prevent his own identity from being revealed." While no one was there, she played the recording of General Lee being stripped of his authority. Secretary Cha's voice was on the recording. This made Mu-jin contemplative. Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Agent Na only agreed to talk if the interrogator was Mu-jin, completely ignoring the chief's words. Immediately after, they transferred her to the Blue House. However, on the way, Captain Yang came to release her. This was the protagonist's idea. He wanted her to secretly investigate Oh Young-seok, finding solid evidence to incriminate him. He also gave her the recording of the call where Secretary Cha stripped General Lee of his authority. The following day, the National Security Council, including Oh Young-seok, the National Intelligence Service, and the military, held a meeting. Strangely, the presidential secretaries were excluded. It seemed they were secretly plotting something dreadful. Secretary Cha, frustrated, returned to his office. However, Captain Yang was waiting for him. He then took Secretary Cha to a secret base for interrogation. There, he honestly confessed that he didn't know what the file contained. At the time, he was only a level 3 secretary, simply following orders from his superior, who was none other than Mr. Han. He further explained that Mr. Han was also unaware of the file's contents, as the president had ordered the retrieval and destruction of all files related to the National Assembly building's structure. Cross-referencing this information with Captain Yang's, it proved Secretary Cha's statement to be true. Finally, he asked Agent Nam if Mu Jin truly believed he was an accomplice in the bombing. He recalled the moment in the hospital bed. Although the data pointed towards his suspicion, Mu Jin had still hoped she could believe in his innocence. Hearing this, he went to visit the president, but he was already asleep. Su Yung, upon learning the truth, apologized for wrongly accusing him. Secretary Cha, unresentful, comforted her, saying, "I would have done the same." Looking at Mu Jin from outside, he realized how truly kind-hearted the man was. Meanwhile, the National Security Council meeting concluded. It turned out the meeting's purpose was to expand the naval base, boldly seizing fishermen's land for operations against North Korea. Hearing this, Secretary Cha angrily confronted Oh Young-siak. Strangely, Oh Young-siak was sitting in the president's chair, a place Mu Jin had never dared to occupy. He then loudly dismissed Secretary Cha, telling him not to concern himself with the superior's affairs. Simultaneously, the news reported on the incident. Mu Jin, visibly worried upon hearing the news, surprised his wife. Could it be that even after being shot, he still wanted to return to the Blue House? At the same time, Miss Yoon and Mr. Kang held a press conference, feigning camaraderie to win public favor and boost their approval ratings. Afterward, Miss Yoon approached Oh Young-siak, warning him that he lacked the authority to expand the naval base and seize the fishermen's land and livelihoods. This was the authority of the elected president, not the acting president. But Oh Young-siak smugly retorted. It turned out the government had paid a hefty sum to the coastal residents, manipulating their support for the decision. He then threatened her back. "With my current approval rating, the people will always believe me. Nothing you do will change the situation." Defeated, Miss Yoon left. Before departing, she warned Secretary Cha to be wary of that dangerous man. Moments later, he also rushed in, shouting, "Is it right to forcibly expand the naval base and take away people's homes?" Oh Young-siak retorted, "I'm just taking the quickest and easiest route." Unwavering, Secretary Cha replied, "If politics doesn't follow procedure and abide by the rules, the country will never develop." That night, Agent Na's team snuck into the military offices, searching for clues about Oh Young-siak. However, just minutes after entering, Oh Young-siak and the American troops arrived. Fortunately, they were quick and avoided detection. There, they overheard Oh Young-siak's secret plan to collaborate with the US to establish a naval base to bolster their position against North Korea. She immediately relayed this information to Mu Jin. If this plan succeeded, the peace treaty between the two nations, which they had worked so hard to build, would crumble. Meanwhile, the candidates were actively courting public favor to increase their approval ratings. Reporter Wu approached Secretary Cha, asking if he was suspected of being an accomplice in the bombing. He denied any involvement, stating that he had been cleared. However, somehow, this information was leaked, pressuring him to the point of wanting to resign. He didn't want his scandal to burden Mu Jin. He confidently told Mr. Han that Mu Jin would definitely run for president and relayed a message to Su Yung to take good care of him. She also told Mu Jin about this. If things continued this way, Oh Young-siak would become president, so he needed to act quickly. Recalling his experiences with Secretary Cha, he realized how much the country needed him. So, he returned to the Blue House, starting with his first press conference. This meant Oh Young-siak would be stripped of his authority and return to his position as Minister of National Defense. Reporters bombarded him with questions, all related to Secretary Cha. He firmly stated that Secretary Cha was not involved in the bombing and subsequently rejected his resignation. At the same time, reporter Wu stood up and asked if he intended to run for president. It turned out he had asked her to pose this question to deflect attention from Secretary Cha's situation. Everyone's expectant gazes turned to Mu Jin. To live up to their faith in him, he officially announced his candidacy for the presidency. Immediately afterward, Mu Jin returned to the Blue House, thanked Oh Young-seok for running the country in his stead, and reinstated himself as acting president to facilitate the election campaign. Secretary Cha urged him to join a political party to increase his votes. However, he refused, believing that since the bomber hadn't been found, joining a party should be postponed. Outside, Secretary Cha was frustrated, but Mr. Han had a different attitude. He didn't want Mu Jin to become president because the former President Yang had dedicated his life to the country but wasn't respected. He said, "This country doesn't deserve a good leader." Simultaneously, Agent Na visited Agent Han in prison to discuss his wrongful conviction. She told him about T-in's elimination and urged him to reveal who kidnapped his son. Agent Han refused, fearing for his family's safety, and chose to leave. Elsewhere, the villains brought food to the young boy. Shockingly, T-in, presumed dead, was standing right there. Suddenly, the boy fell ill, writhing in pain on the ground. Meanwhile, Mu Jin was carrying out a campaign to boost his public image before the election. As it was his first time, Secretary Cha was very anxious, giving him detailed instructions. However, when Mu Jin entered and congratulated the winner of the Best Director award, she showed disdain and ignored him, even shooing reporters away. But then, he revealed the true meaning behind the film, which surprised the director, who had assumed he was there for publicity rather than genuine congratulations. Immediately afterward, the director took a young woman's hand and announced they were in love. Mu Jin fell silent. Since same-sex relationships weren't legally recognized in South Korea, the news immediately hit the press with headlines like, "President supports same-sex love." Back at the Blue House, Mu Jin proposed anti-discrimination legislation. However, no one thought it was a good idea, fearing public backlash and a significant drop in his approval rating. During a media interview, a Chinese editor inadvertently leaked a draft of the anti-discrimination bill. Unaware of this, Mu Jin continued to express his views. Developed countries like Japan and the US have already enacted such laws to protect their citizens. Are we not as good as them? Nam Wook then arrived, apologizing for his loose lips and the leak of the draft bill. Mr. Han explained that the public outcry stemmed from the bill's inclusion of sexual orientation, leading people to believe Mu Jin was promoting homosexuality. Minutes later, Oh Young-seok held a press conference, capitalizing on the public's negative reaction to the proposed legislation to criticize Mu Jin and boost his own approval ratings. Religious groups also voiced their opposition upon hearing the news. Mu Jin's secretary urgently informed him of the situation, fearing a widespread uprising could cost him the presidency. Meanwhile, T-in, unable to help the young boy, took him to the hospital. It turned out the child had a severe wheat allergy. The doctor asked incredulously, "Don't you know your own son's allergies?" Fortunately, a nurse noticed something amiss and alerted Mizu. They rushed to the hospital, but T-in and the boy were gone. Agent Ne searched frantically and found them. She was stunned to see T-in alive, realizing Oh Young-seok was protecting him. She expected T-in to have taken Agent Han's son, but he had left the child alone on the street. She returned the boy to his mother. They then went to the National Forensic Service to examine T-in's supposed body. As expected, it wasn't him. Captain Kang called to report they had found someone who knew about the National Assembly bombing file, and that person was still alive, General Un. However, when questioned, the general retorted, "If you were me, after the National Assembly bombing, would you admit to having seen that file, even having access to it? I didn't even have access, so how could I have used it for terrorism?" This compelling argument secured his release. Captain Kang relayed this information to Mu Jin at their secret base. They shifted their focus to Oh Young-seok. Back home, the First Lady questioned why her husband hadn't told her he was running for president. He calmly replied, "I was afraid my beloved wife wouldn't let me." That night, Mizu investigated a list of boxers. T-in was on it, but he had recently acquired Japanese citizenship and his real name was Jong Kai. What then did Mo Dong's fatal blow symbol mean? The next morning, Secretary Cha nervously approached Su Young and shyly confessed his feelings. However, just as the tension was building, Nam Wook barged in and ruined the moment. The first round of poll results had come in, and Mu Jin's approval rating had plummeted, all due to the anti-discrimination bill. The opposition parties, delighted by this news, joined forces to try and oust Mu Jin. Soon after, Miss Yoon arrived at the Blue House with a proposition: enact the bill, and she would offer her full support. The problem was that enacting the bill would take 60 days, and Moo Jin's term was almost over. Miss Yoon, however, offered to share the burden if he was determined to propose it to the National Assembly. Moo Jin was suspicious. Chief of Staff Jiang also warned him that Miss Yoon was playing a political game, trying to trap him with a controversial bill that would alienate the majority of the public and eliminate him from the presidential race. Hearing this, Secretary Cha vehemently defended Moo Jin, leading to a heated argument with Nam Wook. The moment they stepped outside, they challenged each other to a one-on-one duel in a secluded spot. Everyone braced for a fight. Surprisingly, instead of exchanging blows, they played a game of basketball. After a tense match, Nam Wook emerged victorious. Meanwhile, General Un met with Oh Young-seok, revealing that the person with immense power backing him was the VP, who also possessed incriminating evidence against Oh Young-seok. Both conversations were recorded by Agent Na, who had bugged General Un's phone during his interrogation. Oh Young-seok boldly declared, "I'm going to be president soon. Then I won't be under anyone's control, so don't try to lecture me." Aware that the VIP held incriminating evidence, Oh Young-seok immediately demanded that Mr. Kim arrange a meeting. He threatened to withdraw from the presidential race, jeopardizing the VIP's plans. Mr. Kim, his face paling, promised to relay the message and hung up. Moo Jin wrestled with the decision of whether to enact the bill or focus on the presidential race. Suddenly, the director he had met earlier visited him, thanking Nam Jeong-hak for allowing him to live authentically and promising to vote for Moo Jin. Inspired by this conversation, he resolutely called Secretary Cha to convene a cabinet meeting titled Draft of the Anti-Discrimination Act. The following morning, Agent Han was exonerated, and his family was safe. However, in the distance, someone seemed to be watching them. The NIST director was furious that Moo Jin had released Agent Na. At the same time, Mr. Han warned that if the bill was submitted to the National Assembly, Moo Jin's approval rating would plummet. Meanwhile, Agent Na, while tailing General Un, discovered Mr. Kim's hideout through their conversation. She realized there were other accomplices. Shortly after, Mr. Kim opened a locker containing incriminating evidence against Oh Young-seok. Simultaneously, the cabinet meeting commenced. Unexpectedly, Moo Jin reversed course, choosing not to submit the bill, but instead deferring it to the next administration. Everyone was stunned. The meeting, which had only just begun, ended after a mere 5 minutes, leaving the leaders in disbelief. Miss Yoon was disappointed. It was revealed that her son was gay and had moved abroad because of it. That night, Agent Na, despite warnings from her colleagues, risked entering Mr. Kim's hideout. She found the secret locker, which indeed contained incriminating evidence against Oh Young-seok. Suddenly, someone appeared, knocked her unconscious, and abducted her. Chief Yang, alerted to the situation, rushed to the scene but was too late. The president, worried, ordered him to protect everyone, unwilling to see any more lives lost. At this point, Mr. Kim also went to meet Oh Young-seok, but the VIP didn't show up. There, Mr. Kim issued a threat: if you cross the line, there will be consequences. However, Oh Young-seok wasn't intimidated, retorting boldly, "If I become president, I won't spare your organization." Meanwhile, Agent Na, who had been abducted by T-In, found herself surrounded by a large quantity of explosives. Fortunately, she regained consciousness, quickly broke the car window, and jumped out. As she was about to flee, she realized she was at a shopping mall. Knowing the bombs would endanger countless lives, she risked everything, driving the car away. They had underestimated Agent Na's capabilities. In the final moments, she managed to drive the vehicle into a river and inform Moo Jin that she had secured evidence to incriminate Oh Young-seok. It turned out she had sent it to a subordinate before being captured the previous night. Immediately, dozens of agents were dispatched. However, Oh Young-seok received word of this and turned his car around, making his escape. The agents were left empty-handed. Later, Oh Young-seok realized he had been abandoned by the organization. Even communication with Mr. Kim had been severed. Suddenly, General Un called. He proposed that Oh Young-seok join their coup, promising that once the current regime was overthrown, they would rise to power. Even the intelligence chief was involved. Seeing no other way out, Oh Young-seok agreed to cooperate. At a secret military base, they had prepared tanks and artillery, fully loaded and ready to execute their plan that night. However, Agent Han, positioned outside, overheard everything. As he attempted to report to Mu Jin, he was unfortunately discovered by the intelligence chief and severely beaten. Despite his extensive experience, he was outnumbered and overpowered. Fortunately, Agent Na arrived just in time to save his life. Without hesitation, he returned to the Blue House to inform the leaders about the impending coup. Mu Jin questioned the plausibility of such an event, wondering if these young soldiers understood the laws of the land. Mr. Han immediately countered, arguing that rank is paramount in the military. Furthermore, General Un had long established a financial organization, gathering influential figures from all walks of life. In this critical situation, only one person had the authority to intervene: Commander Lai, the most respected and formerly high-ranking officer in the military. However, he had been twice humiliated by Mu Jin and reacted angrily to the request for cooperation. Anticipating this, Mu Jin presented a second option. Commander Lai must mobilize the Air Force and Navy to help suppress the coup. As a military commander, didn't he care about the safety of the people? That night, Young-siak was intercepted while attempting to join the coup forces. With Agent Na leading the charge, he surrendered to ensure the safety of his colleagues. However, after just a few steps, he was shot by a subordinate who decided to take a desperate gamble, believing surrender to be a disgraceful act in the military. Minutes later, Commander Lai returned to the military. Everyone at the Blue House became anxious, fearing that if he joined the coup, the Blue House might fall. At this moment, the Air Force and Navy awaited orders. Mr. Han urged a preemptive strike, but Mu Jin remained calm, believing Commander Lai would support him. Indeed, Commander Lai kept his promise, subduing General Un. Special agents arrived in droves, arresting the influential figures involved in the coup. General Un angrily questioned, "Why did you follow Mu Jin's orders after he tarnished my honor twice?" Commander Lai boldly replied, "Because he values patriotism above personal honor, and because of Mu Jin's compassion, he believes this country will prosper." Thus, the coup was quelled. Mr. Li was officially reinstated and immediately informed Mu Jin of the mission's success. Overjoyed, Mu Jin was moved to tears. That night, Agent Na interrogated Mr. Un, while Agent Han questioned the intelligence chief. Both received the same answer: they were acting under the direction of VIP. They had never met VIP directly, only communicating through Mr. Kim. Immediately, they began reviewing security footage from various locations and finally uncovered VIP's face. News of Young-siak's death was made public. However, Mu Jin concealed the attempted coup, believing that with the upcoming presidential election, it was best to avoid causing public panic. He also requested the opposing parties keep this sensitive information confidential. He then showed them Mr. Kim's photo, urging them to inform the Blue House of any information regarding him, as he was a key link to finding the true culprit. The next day, Mu Jin's approval rating soared to number 1. Witnessing his skillful leadership, Mr. Han agreed to join his presidential campaign. At the same time, the secretary unexpectedly discovered 2 envelopes containing pictures of Mr. Kim. Notably, Miss Yoon was pictured beside him. He immediately brought this to everyone's attention. However, Mu Jin dismissed the idea of Miss Yoon being the perpetrator, as she, too, had received similar threatening photos. He temporarily handed the photos over to Agent Na. She then shared her hypothesis: VIP was likely a person of significant power and wealth, explaining why high-ranking officials obeyed him. He might even be from a third country. At that moment, Mr. Kim called Miss Yoon, threatening to expose their connection, which would ruin her career. Simultaneously, news of the recent coup attempt broke in the media. Because Mu Jin hadn't informed the public, they criticized him, unaware that he had withheld the information to prevent widespread panic. He planned to reveal the truth once the bomber was apprehended. A press conference was held. Nam Wook continually defended the Blue House's actions, but the barrage of questions put him on the defensive. After the press conference, he pulled reporter Wu aside, asking if she knew who had leaked the information. She denied any knowledge. Currently, the Blue House was in turmoil, grappling with both governing and managing public sentiment. Everyone feared a decline in Mu Jin's approval rating. Indeed, it happened. Miss Yoon now held the top spot. Out of options, Secretary Cha suggested making the investigation into Miss Yoon public to bolster Mu Jin's position. Seeing Mu Jin's hesitation, Mr. Han dismissed everyone. Alone, he persuaded Mu Jin that in a race, one must use any means necessary to win. Only with power could he enact anti-discrimination laws and lead the country into a new era. Convinced, Mu Jin summoned Miss Yoon and revealed that she was under investigation. She remained calm and defiant. However, upon returning to her office, she ordered her subordinates to prepare a vehicle to transport Mr. Kim out of the country. That same night, Mizu uncovered Mr. Kim's true identity. Following the leads, they devised a plan of action. As expected, that evening, they waited for their prey to arrive. Agents swarmed in from all directions. Unfortunately, they were just decoys. The real target was fleeing wildly from behind. Agent Han, seeing this, gave chase in his car. With police support, they quickly intercepted the enemy's vehicle. Then, they split up to pursue and capture him alive. All of them being elite agents, a fierce fight quickly ensued. Though Agent Han had a slight edge, Mr. Kim's tactics were ruthless. He resorted to dirty tricks 3 or 4 times, knocking down his opponent in critical moments. Fortunately, Agent Na arrived just in time, shooting Mr. Kim in the leg and completely subduing him. It turned out that Miss Yoon had agreed to help earlier, after Mu Jin sincerely requested her assistance and expressed his belief that she wasn't involved in the terrorist attack. The next day, Nam Wook publicly announced the capture of an accomplice in the bombing. This news was met with enthusiastic public support. Meanwhile, Secretary Cha confided in Mr. Han that Mu Jin always wins, albeit somewhat strangely. He suggested it was probably because he's a good person. Then he urged Mr. Han to return and help Mu Jin's presidential campaign. However, Mr. Han angrily refused, stating that he had dedicated his entire life to the nation, witnessing presidents fail one after another, and he couldn't continue anymore. He then sought out Nam Wook to tender his resignation. There, Nam Wook recounted his recent experiences to Mr. Han, arguing that holding power for a long time doesn't necessarily turn someone into a monster, as a living, still conscientious witness stood before him. Hearing this, Mr. Han's expression changed, and he agreed to support the presidential campaign. Simultaneously, in the interrogation room, Agent Han was vigorously questioning Mr. Kim, but he refused to reveal the true VIP unless he met with the acting president. Complying with his demand, Mu Jin went to see him. However, Mr. Kim confessed that he himself was the VP, the mastermind behind the National Assembly bombing. Hearing this, Mu Jin seemed doubtful, as a young man alone couldn't have pulled it off, but Mr. Kim smirked, replying that his accomplice had helped him complete the operation. At the same time, the approval ratings were released. Everyone's expressions were somber, but it turned out to be a playful ruse, as Mu Jin's ratings were in first place. However, another major problem arose when Mr. Kim demanded immunity in exchange for revealing his accomplice's identity. Mu Jin returned to discuss the situation, but Mr. Han rejected the idea, arguing that the bombing, which killed 300 people, wouldn't be easily forgiven by the public. Their approval ratings would certainly plummet. Then, Mu Jin summoned Miss Yoon and Mr. Jang, proposing they cooperate to approve a pardon for Mr. Kim. This way, the approval ratings of all 3 wouldn't be severely affected. In the interrogation room, Mr. Kim suddenly had a seizure. They had no choice but to call an ambulance. However, the ambulance was filled with members of the terrorist organization. They injected Kim with something. A few minutes later, he woke up as if nothing had happened. It turned out this was part of the plan. A pill for inducing seizures had been hidden in the lunchbox delivered by his accomplice. At the intersection, they deliberately turned in a different direction. The 2 agents couldn't react in time and lost their target. Now, they were on a rooftop, waiting for a helicopter to escape, but the agents had just arrived. Suddenly, a sniper shot and killed Mr. Kim to silence him for the organization. That person was none other than Tien. With their only lead gone, they had no choice but to interrogate his accomplices. At this point, Mu Jin presented a theory to Chief Kang. If he were Agent Juno, who would he have informed about the bombing beforehand? Upon hearing this, Chief Kang seemed to realize something and immediately ran out. That night, the secretaries diligently worked on Mu Jin's presidential campaign. Secretary Cha even prepared some slogans. At first, everyone laughed at them, but they were later surprised by his persistence. Nam Jeong then returned home, and his wife prepared his favorite meal to celebrate his imminent presidency. Meanwhile, Mizzen rushed in, panicked, revealing that 10 years prior, Mr. Kim and his associates sued the government for compensation for damages they suffered while fighting against North Korea, and their lawyer was none other than Mr. Han. Simultaneously, Chief Kang presented evidence showing that the call reporting the bombing on the day of the incident was made by Agent Oh Young-seok to Mr. Han. They had even scheduled a meeting. Mu Jin was shocked, unable to believe that the person he trusted most was the mastermind behind the bombing. He immediately requested a private meeting with Mr. Han, confronting him with his suspicions. Seeing that he was exposed, Mr. Han didn't bother hiding anymore and said bluntly, "This country has truly decayed. Good people who come to power face fierce opposition from the public." He explained that he wanted to eliminate the old system and use Mu Jin to build a new regime. He also smugly added that if his crimes were exposed, the president would also be held responsible, as he was Mr. Han's supervisor. Before the campaign launch, Secretary Cha prepared videos praising Mu Jin. The moment of the announcement finally arrived, and the secretaries had high hopes. However, Mu Jin announced his withdrawal from the race. Everyone was stunned, as his approval ratings were the highest. He explained that there was a terrorist mastermind within the Blue House, and he had to take responsibility for this failure. Finally, reciting the slogan Secretary Cha had prepared, he sought out Mr. Han and boldly declared that even though changing the country was difficult, he would not give up. Although Chief Kang arrived to take Mr. Han away, Secretary Cha, upon seeing this, reproached Mu Jin for not informing him beforehand. He was devastated by this revelation, but after hearing Mu Jin's explanation, he accepted the situation. Mu Jin's term finally ended. Everyone stood in the hall, showing respect for their esteemed president. He returned to a happy everyday life with his beloved family. It was their end-of-year camping trip, and he and his wife had a long heart-to-heart talk. He shared the good news that Stanford University had invited him to work with them. But he declined, saying, "Being away from my family for so long would make me uncomfortable." However, his wife realized there was another reason holding him back. At the same time, Secretary Cha was invited to meet with a presidential candidate who was trying to recruit him. He immediately refused, stating that the candidate lacked many things, especially the willingness to sacrifice for the country and its people. Coincidentally, he witnessed Dong Jiayu rallying public support for an anti-discrimination law. Meanwhile, the glasses-wearing staff member working in the Blue House suffered under the new regime. Seeing his former colleagues, he resolutely lectured his superiors and boldly announced his resignation, despite his trembling legs. Giona also resigned, citing the corrupt and cowardly leadership of the new regime, whose leaders only paid lip service to the press while forgetting fundamental principles. Not long after, they reunited and surprised Mu Jin at his speaking engagement. They urged him to run for president again, expressing their desire to see a world where good prevails.